to the cloud. Okay. It's always a tense moment. See whether the technology works, and it has done. So that's great. So here we are on lesson 4 already. Just before we start, next week I'm going to have to cry off, I'm afraid. I've got it's my grandchildren's half term, and we're committed to childcare on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday because it's my daughter-in-law's birthday, and they want to go away for the weekend. So rather than inflict you all with my extremely lovely grandson and very charming granddaughter, we'll skip a week. I think I'll set you a few things to do in the comfort of your own home. But we'll miss a lesson next week. I'll put an explanation up on the round robin email. So
what you're really saying is you don't want the children to show us up.
they're not no, these aren't the Spanish speaking ones.
Okay.
These yeah. Although my grandson is learning. He's just started reception class. He's 4 going on 5. Just started reception class, and they do some Spanish at their school. So they have some Spanish lessons. I think they give them a term of Spanish and teach them to say hello, goodbye, how are you, and then they go on to French and teach them the same, and probably German. I think the idea is just to give them get them thinking that actually it's not a bad idea to speak another language. So yeah, it's a good thing. So buenos días, señoras y señores, and bienvenidos a la lección 4 de la clase de español. So this week we're going to start verbs, and we're going to look at verbs in some detail. It's probably going to be quite a difficult lesson to take in, especially for those brand new to Spanish. I do recommend this book. I used to wave it around in the class to the delight of, to the amusement of everybody who seem to think I've got shares in it. I don't. I wish I did. It's a good guide to verbs. It's got all the verb tables in, and it's also got some explanations of when you should use the different tenses and moods. So it's really useful as a reference point. And it's not sort of book you read, sit and read it, but it's a sort of book that you're always grabbing and looking things up in. It's about 14 quid, and you can get quite a few used copies as well, although I seem to find that when you buy a used book, you end up paying as much for postage as you would for a new book. So I don't know. So we've got a lot to take in. I think it's going to be, some of you might have a headache at the end of the class, but stick with it. It will start to make more sense. I can remember when I started learning verbs, and it all seemed like some dark art, and so much to remember, but it's amazing. You keep at it, how much does stick? It's a bit like damp seeping through an old brick wall. Eventually, some of it gets through. So we're going to start today with a little bit of revision. So I've got 5, can't even count, 5 questions for you, just to get our brains going. This is like a bit of a warm-up exercise before we get on to the verbs. So I want to ask you a question, and I want some of you to answer. I'll ask different people to answer, and I don't want you just to say the answer. If it's what's the word for Tuesday? I don't want you to say martes. I want you to say la palabra para Tuesday en español es martes. So construct a Spanish sentence. Okay, that's the plan. So I'm going to select some victims who are lined up like sitting ducks on my screen. So Caroline Gray, ¿cuál es la palabra en español para Monday?
La palabra para Monday en español es lunes.
Excellent. Perfect. Perfect. And Caroline, I'll pick on the Carolines this morning. Caroline Ingram, ¿cuál es la palabra en español para January?
La palabra en español para January es enero.
Perfect. Perfecto. Muy bien. Muy bien. It's always good when there's two brains together, so you can help each other out. And I can see Marilyn running for the kitchen. So Marilyn and Ian, ¿cuál es la palabra en español para Saturday? Oh, we've not got a mic on, I don't think. No microphone. Can you click mic? No. Well, we can see you. We couldn't see you or hear you last week. You can clearly see me because you're chuckling at me. So it's an improvement. This week we can see you. Next week maybe we'll be able to do everything. So let's Amanda, would you be able to help out? ¿Cuál es la palabra en español para Saturday?
La palabra en español para Saturday es sábado.
Muy bien. Correcto. Okay, Abigail, ¿cuál es la palabra en español para July?
La palabra para July en español es julio.
Julio, muy bien, muy bien. Leslie, ¿cuál es la palabra en español para Wednesday?
La palabra para Wednesday en español es miércoles.
Miércoles, muy bien. Good. I think the days of the week are pretty much sorted now. Do keep practicing because it's easy to forget the months of the year as well. But fue pan comido, that was a piece of cake. So we're going to start to learn verbs, and this is where a lot of the hard work starts in Spanish. I'm going to go through all of the main rules and guides on grammar and conjugation, so we get them out of the way in the first lesson. And it's going to seem like an awful lot to take in, but you know, don't worry, you will learn it bit by bit as we go along. Spanish children don't learn this way. They learn by copying from their parents, just like we do. I just want you to understand pretty much the extent of what's needed, what we have to learn, and then relax and learn as much as we need, and we'll learn as we go along. So the first thing is that all verbs in Spanish end in either AR, ER, or IR. There are regular verbs and irregular verbs. Regular verbs all follow the same pattern when they conjugate, so that if you learn the endings, you can conjugate any regular verb. You know exactly what to say. There are an annoying number of irregular verbs, unfortunately, but we don't have to worry about that. So let's have a look at a couple here. Hablar, to speak, is a regular AR verb. You can see that it ends in AR. So the stem of the verb, what we call the stem, is habla, which is HABL, and the ending is AR. So when we conjugate it, we keep the stem and we change the ending. So the AR ending from hablar in the infinitive will change as we say I speak, you speak, we speak, etc. There are also verbs which we call stem changing verbs, and an example of those is poder. Poder means to be able, and it's a verb that it's a really useful verb. It's a verb you'll use a lot to say can I or I can. Can you help me, that kind of thing. You'll use it an awful lot. Poder. The stem is pod, and the ending, it's an ER verb, the ending is ER. The stem changes to pued for some of the conjugations, not all of them. I can, for example, is puedo, but we can is podemos. So the stem doesn't change in every example. You just have to learn them. There's no way around it. But it does start to become second nature. And why does the stem change? Why don't they say podo instead of puedo? Well, it's just easier to say, and I think that's a simple reason for it. There's nothing else there, and why not? We don't want it to be harder to pronounce than we have to. So to recap, all verbs have three endings: AR, ER, and IR. There are regular verbs which follow a nice pattern when they conjugate, irregular verbs which have no pattern at all, and stem changing verbs where in some cases the stem of the verb changes as well as the back. And when using verbs, we can use three moods: the indicative, the subjunctive, and the imperative. And within each mood, there are a variety of tenses. And this year, we'll stick pretty much with the present indicative. We'll do a little bit of preterite, but we'll mainly stick with the present indicative. And that's the regular tense that we use in English just to speak. The subjunctive in Spanish is used for things like hopes and desires, wishes, or where you're unsure whether something is true or not, you drop into the subjunctive. So if you to say to somebody, I hope you have a nice holiday, grammatically, to be grammatically correct, you'd drop into the subjunctive. We're not going to do any subjunctive grammar lessons this year. That's for the Spanish Plus class. But we will use the subjunctive tense occasionally in phrases, and I might point that out to you just so you know that you're using it, and you do it without realizing, because you probably learn the phrase, not necessarily the conjugation of the verb. The other mood is the imperative, and the Spanish have this for when they want to tell somebody what to do. So a command, if you're telling somebody to do something, or you're telling somebody not to do something, would be quite different to the regular conjugation in the present tense indicative. So, I mean, an example is, I talk to my dog. To if I was saying my dog comes here, I would use va acá. She comes here. But if I'm telling her to come here, I have to use a different conjugation of the verb to come, and that is then aquí. So we'll go through these. There are some commands you may want to use quite frequently. Go away might be one that you know, somebody wants to tell you a fortune and they won't stop. You could say, "Go away, please." We'll pick up a few of those. Okay. So let's have a look at how we conjugate. We do conjugate verbs in English, of course, and we do it, you know, automatically, pretty much without realizing that we're doing it. So if we look at the verb to run, for example, the first person singular, and I'm going to use some of these phrases. First person singular, I run. The second person singular, you run. The third person singular, he, she runs. There's a change, really small change, but there is a change. The first person plural, we run, goes back to how it was. Third person plural, they run. So not a lot of changes when we're conjugating verbs in English. Some change more than others, but that generally they don't change that much. In Spanish, the Spanish verb to run is correr, and it's a regular ER verb, and it has 6 forms. So I run is corro. You run, 2 forms. There's an informal and a formal. So if we're addressing a friend and saying that you're running, corres. The formal, corre. He or she runs is also corre. We run, corremos. They run, again, we've got an informal and a formal. The informal, correis, and the formal, corren. So every instance of the verb is conjugated differently. And there's also the formal and the informal, singular and plurals to consider. So there's a lot more conjugations. The downside to this is there's a lot more to learn. The upside is it's a lot more precise. So you don't always have to use the personal pronouns, which we'll come to in a little while. So a lot more to learn. Let's just have a look at the personal pronouns, and we'll do that with an irregular verb, estar, which means to be. So these are the subject or personal pronouns in Spanish, and you'll need to know them. So I is yo or yo, often pronounced yo in different parts of Spain and throughout Latin America pretty much. You in the informal is tú. He is él. Now when we're writing él, meaning he, we put an accent over the E just to distinguish it from the masculine the. It sounds the same and it's spelt the same. So just to distinguish it in writing, they put an accent over it. It's a bit like si for yes and if. Ella is she. Usted is the formal form of you. So if you want to address somebody in the formal, you can say usted it's the equivalent, I guess, of saying Mr. Rayner rather than Eric. Think of it like that. Where you'd address somebody as Mr., address them in the formal usted. We is nosotros. So if it was my wife and I, we'd say nosotros. If it was my wife and her sister, they would say nosotras. So there's a feminine and a masculine form. But if it's a mixed crowd of we, obviously being Spanish, they use the masculine. You in the plural informal is vosotros and vosotras. So again, a masculine and a feminine. So if you're addressing a group of friends and they're all male, vosotros. If they're all female, vosotras. And if they're a mixture of both, vosotros. So generally, you're just using vosotros, I guess. They and you in the plural formal is eos, eas, and ustedes. And again, if it's a mixture of men and women, you'd say eos, they. And you can see how the verb estar, it's an AR verb, but because it's irregular, it doesn't follow any particular rules. Estoy, estás, estar. And we've been using a few of these already. So, buenos días, Carl. ¿Cómo estás? We're addressing Carl in the informal. And he may say, muy bien.
Muy bien. Yeah.
Bien, yeah.
Eric.
And
Me too.
he too, yeah. So we've already started to do that and asking people their name. ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name in the informal? ¿Cómo se llama? What's your name in the formal? So we've been doing a little bit of this. The more observant ones might have noticed the difference, but it's just we just want to learn the right thing to say, really. So we've been saying estoy bien, gracias, ¿cómo estás? So we've used some of these already. So the bad thing about the personal pronouns in Spanish is that there's quite a lot of them. The good thing is that because you conjugate the verb very precisely, you don't need to use the personal pronoun. So if in English we say I run, you run, we run, you've got to say I, you, we. So we know who's actually performing the action. But in Spanish, if you say corremos, we know that it's we run. So we don't need to use nosotros. So they're not necessary. In most cases, they're not necessary. Occasionally, it's not clear whether it's he or she. So you may need to say él or ella. And occasionally, if you want to emphasize something, I want it, yo lo quiero. You can use the pronoun for emphasis. Lo quiero means I want it. Yo lo quiero means I want it. You're putting a little bit more oomph into it. So generally you can forget them. Use them as infrequently as possible. If you're learning Duolingo, I know a lot of you are using Duolingo. Duolingo uses it did when I started to use it, and I don't think it's changed much. It does keep asking for the personal pronoun, and if you don't put it in there, it tells you you've got it wrong and makes you do it again, which is blooming annoying. You don't need to use the personal pronouns as often as Duolingo used to ask you for them, but it doesn't do any harm to know them. That's the main thing. So just to emphasize that, we'd say estoy bien. We know it's I'm well, I'm good. We don't need to say yo estoy bien. It's obvious from the verb that you're saying I am, I be. Okay, so let's have a look here how to conjugate regular verbs. We've got a little table here. We've got 3 verbs across the top, an AR verb hablar, an ER verb comer, and an IR verb vivir. Comer means to eat, vivir to live. So the regular verbs conjugate in this pattern. So if it's an AR verb, it goes o, hablo, AS, hablas, a, habla, hablamos, habláis, hablan. And all regular AR verbs conjugate in that pattern. So if you learn the pattern, you can conjugate any regular AR verb. How do you know it's a regular or an irregular verb? Well, you just have to learn it, I'm afraid. There's no easy answer to that. Comer, an ER verb, that's again has a pattern. Some of it's similar to an AR verb, but with a letter swapped out. So I, como, is the same across AR, ER, or IR verbs. You eat, comes, es. He, she, you formal, come. So changes to E. We eat, comemos. You informal eat, comeis, and they eat, comen. An IR verb, vivir, vivo, exactly the same as the other 3. Vives, vive, vivimos, vivimos, for we. You informal, vivis, and they, you formal, viven. So it takes a while to learn that pattern. It took me a good couple of years actually, but once it's in your head, you can pull it out and you can have a crack at any verb that is thrown at you. Now, just a point about pronouncing verbs. The Spanish ears are very, very special things. They're really good at picking up the slightest sound change in a way that English ears just aren't tuned in to do. So, for example, in Spanish, when you go into the past tense, the simple past tense preterite, the stress is right at the end of the verb. In the present tense, it's like a push through the verb. So hablo, hablas, habla, come, comes, como. It's a really tricky thing to do, but when you do get it right and when you do learn to do it, it's a great help to a Spaniard that you're speaking to, because their ears will be listening for these little clues. So it's worth just practicing that. Comemos, comeis, comen, hablan. Just have a little practice. It takes some doing, and you really need to listen to Spanish speakers do it. They do it really fast, but they do it, and they're super ears can pick up. Now I have put a link to a video for verb conjugations that you can see on YouTube. So yeah, please have a look at that. Take it in and have a couple of views of it. It's worth just doing. I don't think it's ever so long, about 10 minutes, something like that. So if only every Spanish verb was a regular verb, we'd have this thing nailed in a couple of weeks, really. We'd know exactly how to conjugate them. Sadly, it's not the case. There are a lot of irregular verbs. The good news is that a lot of the verbs that we use an awful lot are irregular verbs. So we rather naturally, because we're using them so often, learn what the various conjugations are. So I've put 3 up here. I've put an AR, an ER and an IR verb. Estar, to be, is an AR verb. Ser, ser also means to be. Sadly, there are 2 words in Spanish which mean to be. And we need to understand which one to use and when, as well as learning the conjugations. Ir means to go, and ir is the most irregular of all irregular verbs, but we will use it a lot. So we'll get to know the conjugations very, very quickly. So let's look at estar. We've learned 3 of these conjugations already, haven't we? Estoy, I am. Estás, you are. Está, he, she, is, or you are in the formal. Estamos, estáis, están. The verb ser swaps about a bit, this. Soy, yo soy, I am. If you want to, if you come into a house and your wife's in the other room and you've just come into the kitchen, you want to say, only me, you could say, soy yo, I am I am me. It's me, is the non-literal translation. Eres, you are. Es, it is. You use it a lot for it is. Somos, we are. Sois, and son, they are. Ir is, like I say, the most irregular of all irregular verbs. So we have I go, voy. You go, vas. He, she goes, va. We go, vamos. You've probably heard that in a few low-grade westerns where the Mexicans are saying, hey, vamos, vamos. We go. Vais, you go. And eos, eas, van. There you go. Now, just a quick extra complication in here. We're learning Spanish, and Spanish is spoken differently in different parts of the world and differently in Spain. If you're learning Spanish to speak in Spain, if you're mainly going to use it on holiday in Spain, you should learn the informal you plural vosotros. If you're learning it and you're going to speak it as a Latin American would speak it, they don't use that conjugation at all. It just doesn't exist in Latin American. Most of them know about it, and most of them know the conjugations, probably because they've had some Spanish language movies and things like that, but they never use it. They just use, if we're saying you guys in Spanish, you'd say informal. in Latin America, they just use the formal. So it doesn't exist. When I was asking my son a question, he was about conjugating verbs. He was looking very baffled at me. And he said, what's this? Well, I've never heard of this. And it's because he's learnt in Latin America and it just doesn't exist. So if you want to make life easy for yourselves, learn Latin American Spanish. You can escape one conjugation. So while we're here, let's have a closer look at the verb to be, and let's make these the two verbs that we learn first of all, learn all the conjugations first off. We're going to have an onslaught of verbs now. I'm going to pitch verbs in every week so that you get to know the most commonly used and the most useful verbs that we have that you need to know. So to be is probably the most important verb in any language. And a little annoyingly in Spanish, there are two of them. So we have to learn not only how they conjugate, but also which one to use. So ser and estar both mean to be. Estar is used for the following: health, ¿cómo estás? How are you? Location, ¿dónde estás? Where are you? State or condition of people. So, I'm well. Estoy bien, gracias. The state or condition of things and places. So if you wanted to say Peterborough is nice, you could say Peterborough está bueno. So we use a star for those. Now, it's a huge oversimplification, but ser is used for pretty much everything else. In particular for inherent characteristics and things that don't change. Now that's quite a clumsy way of explaining things, but I want to go. Just want to go through that in the next bit. Okay. So we use and I used to think, oh my goodness, why have they got two verbs that mean exactly the same thing? And it just seemed like a pain in the neck to have to learn the two of them. But now I've been learning Spanish for 5 or 6 years, and I rather like it. It adds a subtlety to the language. I think it just appeals to me. So as an example, if you said, ese hombre está borracho, that man is drunk, you're using estar to indicate a state. So we know the man's drunk. But if you said, ese hombre es borracho, you'd be saying that man is a drunk, because it's a characteristic rather than a state. Está borracho is drunk, but he's going to be sober when he's slept it off. Es borracho, he's a drunk. He's going to be drunk quite a bit of the time. And you can use it with lots and lots of things. So estoy aburrido, I'm bored. Soy aburrido, I'm boring. Don't know when you'd ever want to admit that, but you might want to say that somebody is boring. So you'd use ser because it's an inherent characteristic of that person. It's a boring person. So let's have a little look at in a bit more detail, which may help to clarify some things. So health. ¿Cómo estás? How are you? Estamos enfermo. We're ill. Estoy bien. I'm well. So we've used that quite frequently. You could say about somebody, eres enfermo. You know, you're an ill person. You might want, you probably wouldn't want to say that to anybody, would you? But you might want to talk about them behind their back and say, él es enfermo. He's a sick man. He's always ill. Location, people, places and things where you locate them. Now, this causes a bit of confusion because if you want to say, where's the cathedral? ¿Dónde está la catedral? You think, you know, the cathedral's always in the same place. It never changes. So I ought to use ser, but no, you have to use estar because it's a location. Just learn that. So people, places and things. People, estoy en Peterborough. I'm in Peterborough. Los libros están en la mesa. The books are on the table. ¿Dónde está la catedral? Where's the cathedral? A useful phrase to learn if you want to ask directions. ¿Dónde está? And it should be ¿Dónde está? But the Spanish, you know, they're just like us. If they can find a shortcut, they'll find it. So they don't tend to say ¿Dónde está? They tend to say ¿Dónde está? And you'll hear that. My daughter-in-law used to talk about her children. Son is hijo, H-I-Y-O, hijo, J-O, sorry. And my is M-I. So mi hijo is quite hard to say. So they just be called mijo. And there's all kinds of shortcuts that you'll pick up as you go along. So that's health, that's location. Everybody happy with that? Yeah, It's fairly straightforward. We then come to state or condition. So estoy listo, I'm ready. Él está borracho, he's drunk. El té está caliente, the tea is hot. Estoy ocupado, I'm busy. La taza está llena, the cup is full. La tienda está cerrada, the shop is closed. They're all a state or condition. And we'd use estar to describe it. And ser. So I said ser's used for everything else. Here are some examples. And, you know, you can make an argument about some of these. The first one, ¿qué hora es? Is how you ask what time it is in Spanish. ¿Qué hora es? And the answer might be, if it was 2:30, you'd say, son las 2:30. It's 2:30. It means there are 2.5 hours if we do a literal translation, but that's just it means it's 2:30. And people say, well, why do we use ser for the time? Because the time's changing all the time. It's by its nature, it's changing. I think the argument is that they use ser because that's the time. You're asking what time is it right now, and you're saying it is this time right now, and that is an inherent characteristic. It's not going to change. That's how it is. Again, este libro es de María. de Maria. This book is Maria's, belongs to Maria. Maria might give it away next week. She might put it on eBay and flog it to somebody else. So it won't be Maria's book then. No, well, it won't be, but it'll be Juan's book because he bought it from her. It doesn't have to be permanent for all time to be then its inherent characteristic. Soy de Peterborough. I'm from Peterborough. Again, that's something that's not going to change. You're always from wherever you were born. You might not want to admit it, but it's a regular thing. Somos amigos. We are friends. Somos amigas if it's two women. We're friends. You might fall out. You do fall out with friends from time to time. But again, it's something that is considered to be inherent characteristic. Él es amable conmigo. He's very friendly. No, not very friendly. He is friendly with me. And again, it might be something that changes, but we use ser because that's considered an inherent characteristic. We'll learn lots and lots of these phrases, so you just learn which one to use. It does sound really complicated at this stage. Here's some odd ones, some really odd ones. Ella está muerta. She's dead. Now we're using a star to say that she's dead. Well, why not ser? Because being dead is surely something that's not going to change. But being dead is considered a state or condition. And if you're dead, you use estar. Not going to be too worried whether they're the right form of to be if you're dead, but that's how it works. Él es casado. He is married. Soy casada, I am married if you're a woman. So casado for a man, casada for a woman. It comes from casa, which is house. So I'm housed is pretty much what you're saying. And again, we use ser, which is like a permanent state. But, a lot of people get married and they're divorced within the year. They realize they've made a terrible mistake. He doesn't do his own ironing and he never washes up like he used to when we were courting. Courting's an old phrase, isn't it? Like he used to when we lived together. But it is considered a sort of permanent state. I don't know, maybe it's something to do with the Catholic Church. And jobs, the job you do, ella es una doctora. She's a doctor. Ella es pintora. She's a painter. Interesting that we say we don't tend to use the a doctor. We use a doctor, but we don't say a painter. And it's just one of the quirks of Spanish that doctor is one that you say a doctor, but for other professions you don't. You just say the profession, the job. Again, lots of us have had several different jobs in our lives. We might have been a teacher, and then we gave up and went to sell insurance or something like that, be an estate agent. So jobs are often not a permanent thing or an inherent characteristic, but they are considered to be a sort of semi-permanent thing in Spanish. But so we use ser to say that. Say what you are. Okay. So have we got any questions about? Got 10 minutes to go. Any questions? How do people feel about it? Ian and Marilyn, your new ones. Have we got sound back with you? No, we haven't. I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you. So we've not got that.
They're not on mute, are they? So they turn us out.
I haven't muted them. No, there seems to be some inherent problem with Ian's computer.
No,
So I'd
mine.
have to use the verb "ser" if I was talking about it. Does anybody have any questions? Shout or raise your electronic hand if you do. No? Okay. It's very good. Very good. As I said, we're going to learn lots of new verbs over the coming weeks. I'm going to throw lots and lots of them at you, and let's just clear. So I think it'd be really, really good practice if you bought a verb book. You can get other books are available apart from Barron's 501 Spanish verbs. It's a good idea to get hold of one of those. Also a good idea to get yourself a notebook, and as you learn a new verb, write down the different conjugations. Leave a bit of space at the side because we will do a few other tenses. In particular, we'll start to do the past tense a bit more towards the end of the year, not next week. Don't worry, don't panic. We'll probably do that in May or June. Good idea to leave a little bit of space after the conjugation so you can write in the past tense. But it does help to writing it down does help to fit it into your head, and maybe write a few sentences where you've got where you can use the verb. That's we'll as I say, we're going to throw a lot at you in the next few weeks, so keeping pace might be a bit of a challenge. It will be a bit of a challenge. They will all be useful verbs though, so verbs that you really, really need to know. We've just done ser and a star, so we can say I am, are you, that kind of thing. So let's have a look at asking questions. We've got just a little bit of time, I think. We've got 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, asking questions. We've asked a lot of questions, and quite often there isn't an obvious clue that it's a question. There's an upside down question mark at the front of the sentence, but if we wanted to say are we going now in Spanish, you wouldn't phrase it as you would in English, are we? That tells everybody it's a question. It's nice, easy, useful phrase. In Spanish, you'd say vamos ahora, and you'd have to, essentially saying we are going, but you'd have to make it a question by the inflection. We are going now. We're going now. That's how it works. Just raise the thing. But there are some questions in Spanish that have a more obvious clue, and these words here: donde, where; cuál, which; qué, what; cómo, how or what, all indicate that a question is coming, and that's useful to know. Yeah. Now you notice that you may have noticed that sometimes we have que with an accent on the e, and sometimes we don't have the accent, and como, sometimes we have an accent on the first of, and sometimes we don't. So que can mean quite a few different things. It can mean like. When we're using it to mean what, and we're using it as a question, it will always have an accent on, which is just to distinguish, make it clear in the writing that it is a question. in spoken Spanish, obviously, it sounds exactly the same as it does in another meaning. So you understand what it is in context, not by the accent. The same with como. How or what? Como estás? How are you? So it would be understood in the meaning, or if you want to use it as like, it would sound exactly the same. Como. So when using as questions, always have an accent. Okay. So there are obvious questions, but if I said to you, ¿Quieres un café? It could mean you like coffee, or would you like a coffee? So you do have to make it clear by the inflection of your voice. In English, we'd use the word would. Would you like a coffee? You like coffee? Would you like a coffee? It's obvious. Spanish, you just have to say the sentence with a bit of increase in height at the end. I did say a little like Australians talk, but an Australian once said to me, we don't all talk like that. And I didn't say anything back. I just said, sorry. Maybe how you'd talk if you wanted to be extra cheerful. So, ¿Quieres un café? Just give it a little bit of inflection on there. So that's just a quick things on questions. And we've reached the end of our lesson. Gosh, it does go quickly. I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see everybody a little bit better. There we go. So thanks very much, everybody. I hope that was useful. Oh, Richard and Mario there. I didn't realise you were there.
They sneaked in.
Yeah.
4 minutes, 5
Hola.
minutes late.
Good. Glad you made it. So due to grandparenting duties, won't be a lesson next week, but I will put some homework together for you for this week, and I'll put a few notes together on some verbs that it would be useful for you to learn, so you can be chunnering away to yourselves about blooming language. How hard is this? Why did we ever start while I'm not here? And we'll have another lesson in a fortnight's time, usual time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Just we go,
Thanks,
Eric. Just a question or comment through Ian and Marilyn. I noticed they keep putting on the mute and off the mute. I wondered when they join,